The first thing Elena Vasquez felt was pain. It burned through her skull like fire and pulled her back from the darkness that had swallowed her whole. She opened her eyes and saw nothing but red dust and broken metal above her head. Where was she? The memories came back in sharp, terrible pieces. The patrol mission near the border systems. The Varadi ambush that appeared from nowhere. The explosion that tore through her ship and sent it spinning toward the planet below. Elena pushed herself up from the wreckage and felt glass cut into her palms. Blood dripped down her fingers, but she did not care. She had to move. She had to find her crew. The scout vessel had broken apart on impact, and pieces of it lay, scattered across the barren landscape like the bones of some great metal beast. Elena crawled through a gap in the hull and pulled herself outside. The sky above her was the color of dried blood, and two pale suns hung low on the horizon. She knew this place. Every pilot in the fleet knew this place. Kepler 442D. The soldiers called it the Boneyard because nothing lived here and nothing ever would. Radiation storms swept across its surface every few days, and the atmosphere was too thin for human lungs. Elena checked the seal on her suit and thanked whatever gods might exist that it remained intact. She had air. She had maybe 17 days of oxygen if she was careful. After that, she would suffocate on this dead rock millions of miles from home. Torres. She shouted into her communicator. Static answered her. Chun. Rodriguez. Anyone. Nothing. Elena moved through the wreckage and found Torres first. He lay beneath a collapsed bulkhead with his eyes open and empty. The impact had killed him instantly. Chum was nearby, and her fate had been the same. Rodriguez had made it out of his seat, but a piece of shrapnel had caught him in the chest. He had crawled 10 feet before his strength gave out. Elena knelt beside each of them and closed their eyes. She wanted to cry, but tears would waste water, and water was precious now. She would mourn them later. If there was a later. The communications array was destroyed beyond repair. Elena searched every piece of equipment she could find and salvaged what little remained useful. A water recycler that still worked. Emergency rations for maybe 2 weeks. A plasma cutter with half a charge. A sidearm with 12 shots. It was not much, but it was something. She built a small shelter from hull plates and waited for the radiation storm that her sensors warned her was coming. The storm hit 3 hours later and turned the sky into a wall of green fire. Elena huddled in her shelter and listened to her own breathing. She was alone. She was stranded on the deadliest planet in this sector of space. She was probably going to die here. But Elena Vasquez had not become the youngest commander in the fleet by giving up easily. She had grown up in the slums of New Manila, where survival was a skill you learned before you learned to read. She had fought her way through the academy when everyone told her she did not belong. She had led her crew through 12 successful missions against the Varadi. She would not die on this rock. Not without a fight. The storm passed after 6 hours, and Elena emerged from her shelter. She needed to find water. She needed to find better shelter. She needed to find a way off this planet. That was when she saw him. He stood on a ridge about 200 meters away and watched her with eyes that glowed like blue flames in the darkness. 8 feet tall, covered in black chitinous armor that gleamed in the dim light of the twin suns. Mandibles that could crush bone jutted from a face that looked like something from a nightmare. A Varadi warrior. Elena grabbed her sidearm and aimed it at the creature with steady hands. The Varadi had been humanity's enemy for 60 years. They had burned colonies and killed millions. Every human child learned to fear their shadow. But the alien did not attack. He simply watched her for a long moment and then turned and walked away. Elena did not understand. Why would a Varadi spare a human? Why was there even a Varadi on this dead planet? She got her answer 3 days later. Her water recycler broke, and she had no way to fix it. Without water, she would die in 2 days instead of 17. Elena searched the wreckage again and again, but found nothing useful. She was sitting in her shelter and accepting that this might truly be the end when the Verati appeared at her door. He carried a container in his massive clawed hands and set it down in front of her. "Water! Clean water!" Elena stared at him with her weapon raised. "Why?" she asked. The alien tilted his head and studied her. "Because you will die without it," he said in a voice like grinding stones. He spoke human language. "Why do you care if I die?" "I do not," he replied. "But I have been on this world for 3 solar cycles, and you are the first living thing I have seen. Even an enemy is better than the silence." His name was Kethrol. He had been a commander in the Verati fleet until he refused an order to execute human prisoners. His own people had tried to kill him for his treason, but he escaped and crashed on the boneyard. He had survived by finding the ruins of an ancient civilization buried beneath the dust. The Architects, a species that had vanished thousands of years ago, but left behind technology that still worked. "There are atmospheric processors in the northern wastes," Kethrol told her. "They can produce oxygen and water. I have been trying to reach them, but the radiation storms are too strong for me to cross alone. My biology cannot handle the exposure like yours can." Elena laughed at the idea. "You want to work together? A human and a Verati?" "I want to survive," he said simply. "And so do you. On this world, the war means nothing. There is only life and death. Choose." Elena looked at the alien who should have been her enemy. She thought about her crew who lay dead in the wreckage. She thought about everything she had been taught about the Verati and everything she had believed. Then she thought about the cold truth of her situation. Alone she would die. With his help, she might live. "Fine," she said. "We work together. But if you try anything, I will put a hole through your skull before you can blink." Kethrol made a sound that might have been laughter. "I would expect nothing less from a human. Your species is small and weak, but you fight like cornered beasts. It is almost admirable." "Thanks," Elena said dryly. "You're pretty terrifying yourself." They shook hands in a gesture that felt absurd and historic at the same time. A human and a Verati, enemies for 60 years. Now all eyes on a dead world. Neither of them knew what the future would bring. Neither of them knew that the boneyard held secrets far stranger than either could imagine. They only knew that together they had a chance. And on the boneyard, a chance was everything. The journey north began at dawn. Elena walked beside Kethrol across a landscape that looked like the surface of a nightmare. Twisted rock formations rose from the red dust like the fingers of buried giants. The ground was cracked and dry, and nothing grew anywhere she looked. No plants, no animals. No sign that life had ever touched this world. But Kethrol told her that the boneyard had not always been dead. "The architects made this world green once," he said as they walked. "My people found records of it in the ruins. Forests and oceans and cities that touched the clouds. They were here for 10,000 years before something destroyed them." "What happened to them?" Elena asked. "No one knows. They vanished in a single generation. Every world they touched went silent at the same time. It is one of the great mysteries of the galaxy." Elena looked at the barren wasteland around her and tried to imagine it full of life. It seemed impossible. But then again, she was walking beside a Verati warrior, and that had seemed impossible a week ago too. They traveled for 5 days. The radiation storms came twice, and each time they had to find shelter and wait. Kethrol was not lying about his weakness to the radiation. Elena watched him suffer through the storms with his armor cracked and his breathing labored. Humans had evolved on Earth under a young and active sun. Their bodies were built to handle radiation in ways that other species could not. It was one of the few advantages humanity had in this war. On the sixth day, they reached the first of the architect ruins. Elena stopped walking and stared with her mouth open. A massive structure rose from the dust ahead of them. It was shaped like a spiral that twisted toward the sky, and it was made from a material that looked like glass. The surface was covered in symbols that glowed with faint blue light even after all these thousands of years. "This is a temple," Kethril explained. "The architects built them on every world they touched. We do not know what they worshipped, but they took their faith very seriously." They entered the temple through a doorway that was 3 times Elena's height. Inside, the air was cool and clean. The walls hummed with some kind of energy that made Elena's skin tingle. She ran her fingers over the glowing symbols and felt warmth beneath her touch. "This technology is incredible," she whispered. "How is it still working after so long?" "The architects built things to last," Kethril said. "Their machines draw power from the planet itself. They will keep running until the world dies." They explored the temple for hours. Elena found chambers filled with strange devices she could not understand. She found walls covered in images that showed the architects themselves. They had been tall and slender with skin like polished silver and eyes that held entire galaxies. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The radiation storm came without warning. Elena's sensors screamed an alert, and she looked up to see the sky turning green through the temple's open roof. "We have to go deeper," Kethril shouted. "The outer chambers will not protect us." They ran through the corridors and descended into the heart of the temple. The walls grew thicker, and the symbols grew brighter. Elena could feel the energy around her growing stronger with every step. They found a chamber at the very center of the temple. It was circular, and the walls were covered in the most complex patterns Elena had ever seen. In the middle of the room stood a pedestal, and on the pedestal sat a device that looked like a sphere made of liquid light. "What is that?" Elena asked. "I do not know," Kethril admitted. "I have never seen anything like it." The storm raged outside, and the temple shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, and cracks appeared in the ancient walls. Elena moved closer to the pedestal to steady herself, and her hand brushed against the sphere. Light exploded through the chamber. Elena screamed as energy poured into her body. She could not move. She could not think. She could only feel the light filling every cell and every thought. Images flooded her mind. Worlds being born. Stars dying. Civilizations rising and falling across millions of years. And something else. A purpose. A mission. A desperate hope written into the very fabric of reality. Then the light faded and Elena collapsed. Kethril caught her before she hit the ground and carried her to safety. She woke up hours later with a headache that felt like her skull was splitting open. "What happened?" She groaned. "The device scanned you," Kethril said. "I saw it." "The light went into your body and searched for something." "Searched for what?" "I do not know. But I must warn you about architect technology. It is never simple. It always takes something or changes something. Their machines have a purpose we cannot understand." Elena sat up and checked herself. She felt fine. A little tired, maybe, but nothing seemed different. "I think I'm okay," she said. "Maybe it was just some kind of alarm system." "Perhaps," Kethril said, but his glowing eyes were full of doubt. "We should continue to the processors. The sooner we leave this place, the better." They left the temple the next morning and continued north. Elena tried to forget what had happened, but the images from the sphere stayed in her mind. She dreamed of silver beings and dying stars, and a message she could not quite understand. 3 more days passed. 3 more storms. 3 more nights of strange dreams. And then Elena noticed the first change. She cut her hand on a sharp rock while climbing. It was a deep cut that should have needed stitches. But when she looked at it an hour later, it was already healing. The wound closed before her eyes and left only a faint pink line. "That's not possible," she whispered. She showed Kethral and watched his mandibles click with concern. "I told you," he said. "Architect technology always demands a price. Or perhaps it gives a gift. Either way, you are different now." "Different how?" "I do not know. But my people have legends about those who touch architect machines. They say the architects did not just build worlds. They built people. They created new forms of life designed to survive anything." Elena laughed nervously. "You're saying that machine turned me into some kind of experiment. I am saying that something happened to you in that temple. Something that we do not understand yet. You should watch yourself carefully in the coming days." Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to believe that she was fine and that nothing had changed. But deep inside her she could feel something stirring. Something new. Something that had not been there before. She pressed her hand against her stomach without knowing why. It was just instinct. Just a strange feeling that something important was happening inside her. Something that would change everything. The atmospheric processors were still 2 days away. Elena forced herself to keep walking. She told herself that everything would make sense once they reached safety. She told herself that she was still human. She told herself that the changes did not mean anything. But the dreams kept coming, and the healing kept getting faster, and the feeling in her stomach kept growing stronger. The boneyard had chosen her for something. The architects had left behind a plan that was 10,000 years old. And Elena Vasquez was about to discover what it meant to be part of that plan, whether she wanted to or not. Elena stared at the medical scanner in her hands and felt the world fall away beneath her feet. The device had been salvaged from her crashed ship, and she had used it 100 times before. It was reliable. It was accurate. It had to be wrong. "Run the scan again," she whispered to herself. She pressed the device against her abdomen and waited. The results came back the same. Pregnant, 6 weeks along. How was that possible? Elena had not been intimate with anyone in over a year. She had been alone on her ship with her crew, and none of them had touched her. She had certainly not been with Kethral. The very idea was absurd. But the scanner did not lie. Something was growing inside her. Something that should not exist. Kethral found her sitting outside their shelter with the scanner still clutched in her trembling hands. "What is wrong?" he asked. "You look like you have seen death itself." Elena showed him the scanner results. She expected confusion. She expected disbelief. Instead, she saw recognition in his glowing blue eyes. "The temple," he said quietly. "The sphere that scanned you. This is what it did." "That's impossible. Machines can't make someone pregnant. Architect machines can. I told you my people have legends. The architects did not just terraform planets. They seeded them with life. They created hybrid beings designed to survive any environment and carry forward the genetic legacy of dying species." Elena shook her head. This was insane. This was something from a nightmare. "You're telling me that some ancient alien device decided to impregnate me with some kind of hybrid creature? Why? Why me?" Kethral sat down beside her, and his massive form cast a shadow over the red dust. "The architects were dying. Their records say that a plague swept through their civilization. Something in their very genetics turned against them. They knew they would not survive, but they wanted their knowledge and their purpose to continue." "What purpose?" "Life itself. The architects believed that life was the most precious thing in the universe. They dedicated themselves to spreading it across the stars. When they knew they were ending, they built machines to continue their work. Machines that would find worthy species and help them evolve. Elena laughed bitterly. Worthy? What made me worthy? I do not know exactly. But humans have a quality that other species lack. You refuse to die. Your bodies are weak, and your technology is primitive compared to many races. But you fight and you survive, and you adapt. Perhaps the machine sensed this in you. Perhaps it chose you because humanity represents everything the architects valued. The anger came suddenly, and it burned hotter than any radiation storm. Elena stood up and threw the scanner against the rocks. I didn't ask for this. I didn't agree to be some kind of incubator for an ancient alien experiment. This is my body, and I decide what happens to it. I understand your anger, Kethril said calmly. But the child is already growing. The changes have already begun. You cannot undo what the machine did. Watch me. Elena stormed back into their shelter and started tearing through the medical supplies. There had to be something she could use. Some way to end this pregnancy before it went any further. But as she searched, she noticed something strange. Her hands moved faster than they should. Her eyes saw details in the dim light that she had never noticed before. Her ears picked up the sound of Kethril's heartbeat from 20 feet away. The changes were accelerating. She stopped searching and pressed her hands against her stomach. She could feel it now. A presence inside her. Not a monster. Not a parasite. Something alive and innocent and waiting to be born. Elena sank to the ground and finally let the tears come. She cried for her lost crew. She cried for her lost life. She cried for the choice that had been taken from her. Kethril entered the shelter and sat beside her in silence. He did not offer words of comfort. He simply waited until her tears ran dry. What am I supposed to do? She finally asked. I'm stranded on a dead planet carrying some kind of alien hybrid baby. My whole life has been turned upside down. You survive, Kethril said. That is what you do. I have watched you for weeks now, and I have never seen a creature more determined to live. You did not give up when your ship crashed. You did not give up when your water ran out. You will not give up now. This is different, is it? You are still Elena Vasquez. You are still a commander. You are still human. The child does not change who you are. It only adds to what you might become. Elena wiped her eyes and looked at the alien warrior beside her. A month ago, she would have shot him on sight. Now he was the closest thing she had to a friend. The Verati would kill for this technology, wouldn't they? She asked. Yes. The High Command would do anything to possess a hybrid created by architect machines. They would use it as a weapon. They would study it and replicate it and turn it against your species. And humans would probably do the same thing. Perhaps your governments are not so different from mine when it comes to power. Elena stood up and felt a new strength flowing through her body. The child was changing her, making her faster and stronger and more aware. She could fight this or she could use it. Then we don't let either side find out, she said. We reach the atmospheric processors. We make this planet livable. And we figure out what this child really is before anyone else gets involved. A bold plan. But how do you intend to keep this secret forever? I don't know yet. But I didn't survive the slums of New Manila by having all the answers. I survived by taking one step at a time and refusing to quit. She gathered her supplies and prepared to continue the journey. The child inside her was still a mystery. The future was still uncertain. But Elena had made her decision. She would not be a victim. She would not be a pawn in some ancient game. She would be a mother on her own terms. She would learn what she was becoming, and she would protect her child from anyone who tried to use it. Human or Verati or architect. It did not matter. Elena Vasquez had never let anyone else decide her fate. She was not about to start now. Let's go, she said to Kethro. "We still have a long way to walk." The Varati warrior rose and followed her into the wasteland. Behind them, the twin suns set and painted the sky in shades of red and gold. Ahead of them, the atmospheric processors waited. And inside Elena, something new was growing. Something that would change the balance of the galaxy. Something that began with a single human woman who refused to surrender. The Boneyard had given her an impossible gift. Now she would show the universe what humanity could do with it. The atmospheric processors rose from the dust like metal mountains. Elena stood at the edge of the northern wastes and stared at the ancient machines with wonder. They were massive. Each one was taller than the tallest building she had ever seen on Earth. Pipes and tubes and chambers covered every surface and reached down into the planet itself. The architects built these to turn dead worlds into living ones, Catherall explained. They pump chemicals into the atmosphere and draw water from deep underground. If we can activate them, the Boneyard will begin to heal. Elena pressed her hand against the nearest processor and felt vibrations deep within the metal. Power still flowed through these ancient machines. They were sleeping, but they were not dead. How do we turn them on? She asked. There should be a control center somewhere nearby. The architects always built their machines with. Catherall stopped speaking, and his whole body went rigid. His mandibles clicked rapidly, and his eyes blazed bright. What is it? Ships. I can hear their engines. They are entering the atmosphere. Elena looked up at the blood-red sky, but saw nothing. Then she felt it too. A rumbling in her bones. A pressure in her ears. Her new senses were still developing, but they were strong enough to confirm what Catherall said. Someone was coming. Varati? She asked. Yes. 3 assault craft. They are heading directly for us. How did they find us? Catherall's expression was grim. They must have detected your biosignature. The child you carry emits energy patterns unlike anything in the known galaxy. My people have sensors that can track such anomalies. Elena felt her blood run cold. The High Command knows what I'm carrying. They know something valuable is here. They will not stop until they have it. The ships appeared on the horizon minutes later. Black shapes against the red sky. They moved with deadly grace and descended toward the processors like predators closing in on prey. We have to run, Elena said. There is nowhere to run. They will hunt us across the entire planet. Our only chance is to reach the control center and activate the processors. The energy output might disrupt their systems. They ran through the maze of pipes and chambers while the ship circled overhead. Elena's enhanced body moved faster than it ever had before. She leaped over obstacles that would have stopped her weeks ago. She saw paths through the machinery that she would have missed with normal eyes. The child was making her stronger with every passing hour. Soldiers dropped from the ships and hit the ground running. Elena could hear their clawed feet pounding against metal. She could smell their alien scent on the wind. 12 warriors, each one armed with weapons that could tear through steel. There! Catherall pointed to a structure at the center of the processor array. The control center. They sprinted toward the building while plasma fire exploded around them. A shot grazed Elena's shoulder and burned through her suit. She felt pain, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Her daughter's life depended on reaching that building. Her daughter. When had she started thinking of the child that way? They burst through the doors of the control center and Catherall sealed them shut behind them. The walls were thick enough to hold for a few minutes, but the Varati soldiers would break through eventually. The controls. Elena shouted. Where are they? The room was filled with architect technology. Panels covered in glowing symbols lined every wall. A central platform hummed with dormant power. Elena had no idea how to operate any of it. But then something strange happened. Her hands moved on their own. She walked to the central platform and began touching symbols in a pattern she did not consciously know. The room started to shake. "How are you doing that?" Catherall demanded. "I don't know. It's like the knowledge is already inside me. The machine in the temple must have given me more than just a child." The symbols blazed brighter. The humming grew louder. Outside, she could hear the Varadi soldiers trying to break down the doors. "Elena, they are almost through." She worked faster. Her fingers flew across the panels. Information flooded her mind, and she understood things she had never learned. The processors were connected to a network that spanned the entire planet. That network was connected to defense systems buried beneath the surface. Systems that the architects had built to protect their creations. The doors exploded inward, and Varadi soldiers poured into the control center. Their leader stepped forward and pointed his weapon at Elena. "Human female, you will come with us. The High Command demands the specimen you carry." Elena turned to face him with her hands still on the controls. "I don't think so." She pressed one final symbol. The world erupted. Energy poured out of the processors and into the sky. A dome of light expanded from the control center and swept across the wasteland. The Varadi soldiers screamed as their weapons overloaded and exploded in their hands. Their ships shook in the sky and their engines died. One by one, the assault craft fell to the ground. The defense systems did not kill. The architects had not believed in killing, but they believed in protecting life. And Elena had just shown them what needed protection. The soldiers retreated from the control center with burns on their armor and fear in their eyes. Their weapons were useless. Their ships were grounded. They were stranded on the boneyard just like Elena had been. Catherall stared at her with something like awe. "You activated the defense grid. No one has been able to do that in 10,000 years." Elena looked down at her hands. They were glowing faintly. The same blue light that filled the architect's symbols now flowed beneath her skin. "The child is connecting me to their technology. I can feel the whole network. The processors. The temples. Everything the architects left behind. It's all waking up." Outside, the Varadi soldiers regrouped. Their leader shouted orders. They could not use their weapons, but they still had their strength. 12 Varadi warriors against one human woman and a traitor. The odds were impossible, but Elena was not afraid. "Stay behind me," she told Catherall. "What are you going to do?" "Something human." She walked out of the control center and faced the soldiers alone. They charged at her with claws extended. Elena raised her hands, and the ground beneath the soldiers erupted. Metal tentacles burst from the earth and wrapped around each warrior. Defense drones that had slept for millennia rose from hidden chambers. The boneyard itself came alive to protect her. "This planet belongs to the architects," Elena shouted. "And right now it answers to me. Leave this world. Tell your High Command that the human they're hunting is not prey. She is something new. Something you should fear." The soldiers struggled against their bonds, but could not break free. Elena released them with a thought and watched them flee toward their crashed ships. They would survive. They would find a way to send a message home. And the Varadi would know that the boneyard was no longer dead. Catherall walked up beside her and placed one massive hand on her shoulder. "You have changed everything. When word of this reaches the fleet, they will send more ships. Hundreds of them. Then we better get these processors running. If I can wake up the defense systems, I can wake up everything else. By the time they get here, this planet will be a fortress." She looked up at the red sky and felt her daughter kick inside her. A tiny movement. A sign of life. A promise of things to come. The Varadi wanted her child. Humanity would probably want it too. But Elena Vasquez was not going to let anyone take her daughter. She had an entire planet at her command. She had technology that predated every civilization in the galaxy. She had the stubborn, relentless will that made humans the most dangerous species in the universe. Let them come. She would be ready. 7 months had passed since Elena activated the atmospheric processors. 7 months of watching the dead world slowly return to life. The sky was no longer red, but a pale shade of blue that grew deeper with each passing week. Water flowed in rivers that had been dry for 10,000 years. The first green shoots of genetically preserved plants pushed through the soil. The boneyard was becoming a garden. Elena stood on a ridge overlooking the valley where she had once crashed and marveled at the transformation. Her belly was round and heavy with new life. Her body had changed in ways that went far beyond the pregnancy. Her skin had a faint shimmer that caught the light. Her eyes could see spectrums that human eyes were never meant to perceive. She could feel the pulse of the planet beneath her feet. She was no longer entirely human, but she was not entirely architect either. She was something new, something that had never existed before. Kethra walked up beside her and looked out at the valley. The scouts report that a joint fleet has entered the system. Human and Varadi ships. They will be here within 6 hours. A joint fleet? Yes. It seems the war has been paused. Both sides want to know what is happening on this planet. They have seen the readings. They know that the boneyard is coming back to life. They know that a single human woman is responsible. Elena smiled. Let them come. We're ready. The defense grid was fully operational now. Hundreds of drones patrolled the skies. Shields protected the key installations. The boneyard could defend itself against any fleet. But Elena did not want to fight. She had spent her whole life fighting. Fighting to survive in the slums. Fighting to prove herself in the academy. Fighting the Varadi across a dozen star systems. She was tired of fighting. When they arrive, I'm going to talk to them. She said, both sides. I'm going to show them what we've built here and offer them a choice. You think they will listen? I think they're curious. I think they're scared. I think deep down both humans and Varadi are tired of this war. 60 years of death and nobody even remembers why it started. Maybe it's time for something different. The contractions began 2 hours before the fleet arrived. Elena knew immediately that something was wrong. The pain was too sharp. The pressure was too strong. Kethral, the baby is coming. He carried her to the medical bay they had constructed near the control center. Architect machines hummed around them. Lights flickered and drones gathered outside like anxious relatives. Elena screamed as the contractions intensified. Her connection to the planet pulsed with each wave of pain. The skies darkened. The ground trembled. The boneyard felt her agony and responded. Elena! Keth, Raul shouted. You have to control yourself. You are tearing the planet apart. She gripped the edges of the medical bed and forced herself to breathe. In and out. Slow and steady. The earthquake subsided. The skies cleared. But the pain continued. Hours passed. The fleet entered orbit and sent a message demanding answers. Elena barely heard it. All she could focus on was the child fighting to be born. Then finally at sunset on the 7th month of her impossible pregnancy, Elena gave birth. The baby slid into Kethral's waiting hands and let out a cry that echoed across the entire planet. Every machine responded. Every processor surged. Every light blazed bright. And then silence. Elena lay exhausted on the bed and reached out with trembling arms. Let me see her, please. Kethral placed the baby in her arms and stepped back. Elena looked down at her daughter and felt tears streaming down her face. The child was beautiful. She had Elena's dark hair and her strong features, but her skin had a subtle shimmer like starlight caught in amber, and her eyes when she opened them were silver and gold and filled with ancient wisdom. "Hello, little one," Elena whispered. "I'm your mother. I've been waiting so long to meet you." The baby reached up and touched Elena's face. And in that moment, Elena understood everything. The architects had not just created a hybrid. They had created a bridge, a living connection between the past and the future. Her daughter carried the knowledge of a civilization 10,000 years dead. She carried the genetic legacy of humanity's stubborn will to survive. She was hope made flesh, a promise that life would continue no matter what. "Kira," Elena said. "Your name is Kira. It means beam of light in an old Earth language. And that's what you are. A light in the darkness." The fleet's commanders demanded a meeting. Elena walked out of the medical bay with Kira in her arms and Kethril at her side. She faced the screens where human admirals and Varadi warlords waited with weapons ready. "My name is Commander Elena Vasquez of the Earth Fleet," she said. 7 months ago, I crashed on this planet. I was alone and I was dying. A Varadi warrior saved my life. Not because we were friends, but because we were both tired of death. Together we discovered technology left behind by a species older than both of ours. Technology designed to spread life across the universe. She held up Kira for them to see. "This is my daughter. She is not a weapon. She is not an experiment. She is a child born from human resilience and architect wisdom. A child who represents everything both of our species could become if we stop fighting." The admirals muttered among themselves. The warlords clicked their mandibles in confusion. The boneyard is no longer dead. Elena continued. "In a few years, it will be a paradise. Water and air and land enough for millions. I'm offering it as neutral ground. A place where humans and Varadi can work together. A place where we can learn from the architects and build something better than war." One of the human admirals spoke. "And if we refuse? If we decide to take what you have by force?" Elena smiled. "Then you'll face the same defense grid that destroyed a Varadi death squad. And you'll face something else too. You'll face a mother protecting her child. Trust me, Admiral. You don't want that fight." Silence stretched across the communication channels. Then one of the Varadi warlords spoke. "The human female has courage. She speaks like a true warrior. She speaks like someone who has nothing left to lose." The Admiral replied, "I have everything to lose." Elena said, "I have my daughter. I have this world. I have a chance to end a war that has killed billions. That's exactly why I'm fighting so hard. Because some things are worth more than victory." The negotiations lasted 3 days. Elena barely slept. She held Kira close and argued for peace while fleets circled overhead. But in the end, they agreed. A ceasefire. A trial period of cooperation. Scientists from both species would come to the boneyard and study the architect technology together. Diplomats would begin real peace talks for the first time in 60 years. It was not a perfect solution. Many on both sides were furious. Many would try to sabotage the process. But it was a start. A single crack in a wall of hatred that had stood for generations. The first rain fell on the boneyard 3 months later. Elena stood outside with Kira in her arms and let the water wash over them. Kethril stood beside her with his face turned toward the sky. "I never thought I would see rain," he said. "Not here. Not anywhere." "Neither did I," Elena admitted. "But here we are. An enemy who became a friend. A dead world becoming alive. A war becoming peace. Everything changes, Kethril. That's what humans believe. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is impossible." Kira laughed and reached out to catch raindrops in her tiny hands. Her silver eyes sparkled with joy. Elena sent one final message to Earth and Varadi Prime that night. Humanity does not merely survive. We adapt, we build. We find hope in wastelands and turn enemies into family. The architects searched the galaxy for species worthy of carrying their legacy. They chose us because we never give up. Because we fight for what we love. Because we refuse to accept that anything is truly impossible. You wanted to know what makes humans special. This is it. We don't wait for miracles. We make them ourselves. And we're just getting started. The rain continued to fall. The first flowers bloomed. A human woman and her hybrid daughter and their Verati guardian stood at the beginning of a new age. The universe had taken notice of humanity, and Elena knew in her heart that this was only the first chapter of a much larger story. A story of life spreading across the stars. A story of enemies becoming allies. A story that began with one stubborn woman who refused to die on a dead world. The boneyard was alive. The war was ending. The future was waiting. And Elena Vasquez was ready for whatever came next.